So is anybody dressing as an actual Disney princess tomorrow? I'm curious how many of which different princesses we're going to have.
It's kind of hard to come up with a green.
Brave. There it is.
Tinkerbell, the Green Army guys from Toy Story. Yeah, I was going to be the Green Army dudes. The little alien dudes from Buzz Lightyear, Mike Wazowski, Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah, we're talking about princesses today. A lot of people claim they want to be princesses. No, you don't. Not really. Nah. If you get a real princess, no. Fairy tale fantasy princess, sure. But real princess, nah.
Is it not fun being a real princess?
No.
What do you do?
We'll talk about it when we get to Versailles. Keep in mind how utterly misogynistic and chauvinistic the world has been historically. Basically male-dominated is what I'm getting at. Being a woman wasn't all fun and games, even if you were a princess, you know. Because basically that just meant that. Because the thing is that whenever a king had a daughter, they were disappointed to some extent, because a male son, you know, a male heir, I mean to say, could carry on the family name, but also could expand holdings and things like that. Daughters were generally reserved for marrying the people who you needed as allies. So this meant you might be married to someone who is 30 years older than you are. The oldest I've ever heard was a 4-year-old girl engaged to marry a 35-year-old man. That's 4, yeah. However, it was we're engaged, but we're going to hold off the wedding until you're a bit older. Yeah.
I don't want to sound inappropriate, but like,
No.
Okay.
No, because that wasn't allowed outside of marriage. And you might ask, well, how do they keep track of it? They didn't, obviously. There was no possible way for them to keep track of all that sort of thing. But if you were caught, it was bad. If a guy does it, it was considered okay, to some extent. The worst thing he can have happen is that he's engaging in extramarital activities with someone else who is married, and that person's husband finds out about it and kills them. What can happen to a woman is her life become a living hell. So it was, generally speaking, a problem in society at the time. That didn't mean that women had absolutely no power, but they were oppressed more than is what acceptable today. Like we hear about all the time, like, you know, women being physically and emotionally abused by their spouses and things like that. But the reason that that's significant is because we're hearing about it. You know, in our society, we try to put an end to it now, and there's measures out there to record it, and it's being treated. In fact, it's actually down. It's the lowest it's ever happened in history. But that's because for a lot of time it was just a given. You know, it's just part of it. Some cultures even suggested that it was totally okay to beat your wife if she got out of line. So I mean, this wasn't just reserved for, you know, like just because you were a princess didn't mean you weren't able to have that same thing happen. You know, I mean, the fact you didn't have the choice of who you were going to marry in a lot of cases was one of the big stressors in life. Now, that being said, this is one of the reasons why in like fantasy and fairy tales you have the girl fall in love with the guy despite him not having anything, but their love is going to conquer all, that sort of thing. That just, it never happens, or so infrequently happened as to be basically non-existent. That's why it's fantasy. You know what I mean? So that's where I make the distinction. Want to be a fantasy princess? Cool beans. Princess Leia was a fantasy princess. You know, she was pretty cool. But saying I want to be an actual princess, you want none of that business. Just saying. Yeah. No. It's not like they can just go buy all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's not that, yeah, they do. They have some wealth and power. But honestly, if you just want money, it's better to be like, well, I want to be like Paris Hilton or something like that. And they're just incredibly wealthy with zero responsibility. Because that sounds pretty awesome. Except if you actually look at people's lives like that, it's pretty shallow. They actually did a really interesting documentary on these people, and they had absolutely no concept about like the worth of things. Like when it was like, people are, they're homeless, they don't have jobs, things, and that's like, why don't they just go buy another house? Because they don't have the money for it. How much does a house cost? And so that's only like $1,000. I mean, things like that. They have absolutely no concept. It's like they interview people like this and say, what do you think the average American household makes? Like, I don't know, 500,000 or something like that. It's like the average American household makes about 50,000. So they have absolutely no concept because that's just what they're used to, I suppose if you're going to wish, to have money and power with no responsibility, that's kind of a nice job, if you call it a job, I guess. I don't know. It's just things. Sorry to be a buzzkill. That's how it goes. That's what we do. It's okay, guys. Just wish that you, I don't know, you're a mermaid or something. I don't know. Or a unicorn. I don't know. Whatever. Disney princess. It's funny stuff. It's okay. Say what you want. So it's like. So anyhow, have we talked about all this yet? Did we talk about this? The Eve of Nantes? So we didn't talk about anything. What's a Huguenot? No. That says Prince. That says Huguenot. Two different things. It is a French Protestant. Yes. Who said it? Who said it? Man. Yeah. All right. So he's Protestant. Fantastic. There's a religious war going on. Not so fantastic. Remember there was that wedding where everyone killed each other? There's thousands dead. Yeah, that's going on. So we want to stop that. How do you get religious tolerance? Hooray! But here's the problem. He's Protestant, majority are Catholic. So he converts to Catholicism. So it's like, hey, bro, it's cool. But he signs into law the Edict of Nantes, which basically grants religious freedom to everybody. That's significant. That's going to be a basis for a lot of religious laws coming up, because we're getting into a period of time in the 1700s known as the Enlightenment. Basically what that is, the ideas of freedom, justice, things of that, sort of the principles America are founded on, come out during this era. Guys like John Locke, Montesquieu, all these folks are talking, thinking, and writing and so on. So the Edict of Nantes is kind of an important document, 1589. Henry IV becomes a very popular king for a few reasons. One, the chicken in every pot. What on earth does that mean? Well, here's the thing. How many guys have a meal once a week with your family? It's kind of a big deal. Anybody? Okay, interesting. That would be an interesting sociology experiment. Anyways, it used to be that Sunday dinner was a big deal. Sunday dinner was always the thing that was a big deal for the family, and you'd have a special meal to kind of celebrate family and to have like a good day, And a lot of cases, this was chicken. Now, the reason is simple, because chicken is delicious. There's all kinds of ways to do chicken, but also chicken takes time. Consider this. A chicken was generally butchered right before you cook it. So that means killing the chicken, preparing it, ripping out feathers, which apparently is a real big pain in the butt, and then seasoning, cooking. It's an all-day affair, so it's special. You only had it a few times. But also, raising chickens is hard. Because one of the things you have to keep in mind, as soon as chicks hatch, they have no way to regulate their body temperature. So traditionally, how do they regulate their body temperature? How do they stay warm? Mama sits on them. Not really on them. She, tucks them close, and whenever they're a little too warm, they'll go over here and go explore. Okay, I'm cold again, come back, and that's how they hang out. Nowadays, we use technology, heat lamps in a box called a brooding box, and you shine it in one area. That way, the chicks can stay nice and warm and go about their business. The thing is, that technology did not exist for much of history. So chicken was actually very expensive. It was a luxury kind of thing. It was nice if you could get it, but it wasn't an everyday sort of thing. So like turkey, I think, in this country, like, think about how many people do full roast turkey. It's probably limited to like Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas, I mean, some folks really like it. My mom is actually an excellent turkey cook, like unbelievably good as a turkey cook. I have to show my mom this video now because I'm talking for turkey. Like, it's, oh my God, it's the best thing in the world because it's totally juicy and it's just amazing in every possible way. So thumbs up, Mom, for great turkeys. Like even like my wife was like, you kind of like when you're growing up, you kind of prefer what your parents cook for you, She was like, my mom can't cook a turkey to save your life, and I always look forward to your mom's turkey. So it's just kind of a funny thing. My mom actually makes her Thanksgiving dinner for her birthday dinner now because she likes it so much. So it's not that we care, but it's the same sort of thing, luxury. So here's the deal. What Henry was trying to promote was wealth for everybody. Not saying everybody's going to be rich, because that's impossible. But everybody has enough to cover your bases and a little bit extra. And generally, that's what makes people happy. Yeah, we all want to be rich, whatever. But we're pretty content if we have everything we want, for the most part, and are comfortable. It's when people start getting uncomfortable that we have problems. Like if you have a starving population, that's when revolution happens. If people feel they don't have enough jobs, that's when revolution happens. That could be social revolution, not political revolution, but regardless, that's when people get upset. If people are content and taken care of, they're pretty happy. So he's investing in the welfare of his people. He's saying that every family should have enough money to have chicken once a week. And because it's a symbol of prosperity, what he's really saying is enough plus a little bit extra, a little bit of luxury. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, chicken. Okay. Also building roads. Guys, building roads is probably the most thankless job in the world. Because think about this. If you've ever been driving, you're like, oh my God, road construction! Ah! Like I see people do all the time going to Indiana because the bridges are being constructed. People lose their minds. I almost got ran off the road 3 times by the same guy yesterday because like he couldn't handle being slowed down for a second because of the bridge traffic. People hate road construction, and yet without it, what happens? No roads. They fall apart. You have to do it. In fact, when this construction's done, everybody's going to have a lot faster time. So in the long run, it's going to be a great benefit. But people don't think long run. They think short term. I want it now, and they get all upset and bent out of shape over it, and it's bad stuff. And if you're a politician and you're like, we're going to build roads, people will hate that. Yet it benefits them. It's like you got to do it for their own good when people are done. So just remember, roads good because it means traveling and all this sort of stuff. He started not only building roads, but also refurbishing the old Roman roads that existed before and making them usable again, speeding up transportation, making everything better. He also strengthened the royal bureaucracy, which basically meant that France worked better as a government. However, due to religion, again, he was assassinated by Francois Ravaillac in 1610, leaving his son Louis on the throne to be Louis XIII, not Louis XIV, who ended up having to rebuild France after this assassination. Now, he was too young, obviously, to do this, so he has an advisor basically put on the throne, which you call a regent. Someone who basically does what a king does until the king comes of age, and not only acts as a king in his place, but also sort of like a mentor, so like, this king is what you got to do. And this dude is one of the most infamous French guys ever. He was a cardinal. And he was so infamous because he was actually written into a book called The Three Musketeers. If you know The Three Musketeers, you probably know the villain in that book, Cardinal Richelieu. Now, here's the first thing. He was Machiavellian, which meant what? Machiavellian. Anybody know what I mean when I say Machiavellian? Who is Machiavelli? Niccolo Machiavelli.
You have to do what you have to do.
Yes! Yes! Do whatever needs. That, oh, I'm so happy. Woo! Okay. So I went through, like every year I do that question. They're like, what? I was like, we talked about it like 3 weeks ago. And fantastic. You guys remember. Yeah, it basically means you do what you got to do. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote a book called The Prince, and then he talked about basically how to be a good ruler. And the way he suggested it was by basically throwing morality out the window and doing whatever needs to be done, regardless of what needs to be done. And so this is what he did. Now, one of the key problems with a government that's a monarchy is succession. Who is going to rule once the king dies? And here's why that's a problem. Who is it that becomes the next king when the king dies? King's son. Okay, fantastic. So let's look at this. Let's say we have Mr. King and Mrs. Queen. They have 3 sons. 1, 2, and 3. Who is it that becomes the next king? The oldest, so number 1, sure. So 1 has his own queen, and 2 has a wife, and 3 has a wife. They have 2 more sons. Let's say this person has 3 sons, this person has 1 son. Okay. So, they also have wives. The thing is number 1 dies. So who becomes king now? Well, here's where problems start to happen. Because you could argue that, yes, this person is now king because it's the former king's second son. But let's say, for argument, that this one's alive. The brother of the king. The brother could argue, hey, I'm second in succession because I'm the son of the original king. Now, what's that? Exactly like the Lion King. Now, what can be even more confusing is, let's say that this wife over here was, or let's say this wife was a foreigner. So this guy right here could claim not only the kingdom of this kingdom, but another kingdom through his wife. Any children they have might argue for the succession as well down here. And basically what happens is you have a giant civil war. The winner is whoever's next king. So let's say, just hypothetically, that number 2 kills his nephew and basically wipes this line out. Now this person becomes king. Well, if somehow this person had a son who survived, this person could hypothetically still be king, even though now the dynasty is shifted. So you can see how confusing this can get real easily, yes? Now add to this the fact that the nobility, many of them are intermarried with the royal family. So your nobles are all basically potential threats to the throne. And a noble's primary job in medieval Europe is to raise an army, ostensibly for the defense of the kingdom and backing up the king in war, but there's nothing stopping them from using that army against the king. This is where revolution occurs. Yeah. Rebellions.
So, that was confusing.
Yeah, that's the point.
So when the king and queen have kids,
Yeah.
the oldest becomes king. He dies, is it his son or the second son?
That is the debate. Could be either or. Now, traditionally, it is the son of the former king. So, for instance, the eldest son becomes king. He has a son. Now, that person should be king, even if his uncle's alive.
The other 2 are.
Exactly.
And then, so they have a daughter. The king and queen have daughters, 3 daughters. Do they choose they choose the guys that they want to be the next king, or do the daughter?
Here's how that works. It really depends. And this is why Henry was so nervous about having only women as an heir. So let's say she is married, right? Her husband cannot be king because he is not king of England. She is still queen. He becomes a prince by association. By the way, Queen Elizabeth II, current Queen of England right now, that's what her husband is, not a king. So that's how they would no. In that case, there's a queen and a queen only. However, a queen cannot lead armies. So she needs a husband to lead armies for her to defend her claim. Because you bet that because it's not a guy who's an accomplished, like if there's an accomplished general on the throne and he ascends, suddenly people don't want to fight him. Because that dude's a monster, and he's probably going to tear you apart if you try to challenge him to the throne. Now, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes they do, but it's a much larger threat. People will tend to kind of fall in line. But if it's a woman, well, then things get a little interesting. Now, in the case of Mary Tudor, she was married to the King of Spain. So that totally worked. However, when she died, he was no longer important because he wasn't King of England, he was King of Spain. So basically it went to Elizabeth, who never married. So she ends up facing all kinds of challenges to the throne and has to fight it out in a lot of kind of creative ways in order for her to hold on to the throne. So it really, really depends. Now, a citizen is still supposed to follow the line. But in traditional monarchy, it can follow the male line just in a different angle. That does happen regularly. Now, the thing that really kind of messes this up, in some kingdoms, i.e. the Ottoman Turks, they pick who they want as successor. It could be no one in their family. So, that gets even more kind of confusing because there is no line. It's whoever's strongest, basically, which is why there were civil wars every time there was a succession. So it kind of depends. It is an interesting subject, though. Yeah.
You might have said this, but let's say, like, the king, queen, and Alexander had daughters, and the daughter never marries, but she dies. So, like,
goes to the next closest family.
Yeah, I was going to say that we go to the next closest.
Yep. Could be a cousin, could be an uncle. So, for instance, the example we gave, let's say all it was girls. Well, if the king had a brother, now they're king. Or if they were already dead, their brother, if they had a son, now they're king. In fact, it can go back multiple generations at that point. And you'll have people say, yeah, I'm really king of England. And what happened is, like in some cases, like, I forget the English king, I think it was Henry V. Like when he comes into his power, he actually has lands in northern France, so he's supposed to go swear fealty to the King of France, which he does, but then after he gets his armies together, he recants that saying, yeah, you're actually a pretender, I'm the real King of France because I have a French descendant going back 3 generations or whatever, so I'm the real King of France. They fight a war, the 100 Years' War. So it's one of those things that generally what happens, if there's any doubt, there's a war. In some cases, it's bloodier than others. So succession's a messy business. And remember that, because when you get to the democratic system, most times you had someone die and another person gained the throne, there was going to be bloodshed. The whole idea of switching power without death is such a novel concept, people didn't even know it was possible. That's why they called America the Great Experiment. Now, another thing that's interesting, right now, you guys probably are familiar with what's going on in Scotland, yes?
No.
Scotland is voting today whether or not they're going to be an independent country. What's that? Oh, snap, yeah. But what's interesting about that is it's sort of, again, the democratic process, but it's revolution democratically. How regularly do you hear that? Not very. It happens, but it's not frequent. But pretty cool. So anyways, what we're going to see Richelieu do is he takes away the power of the Huguenot armies. The reason is he doesn't trust them to follow the Catholic king, but he also isn't necessarily oppressing them either. He lets them keep their faith, but they cannot have their fortresses and they cannot have their armies. He also begins to make the throne the dominant force in France. This is going to be carried on even more so by Louis XIV. That's Richelieu, by the way. I realize his head looks really, really tiny, but that's because of the size of his robes and the perspective point. Oh, my Lord. Wow. All right, that was busy. All right, there we go. So Louis XIV. You guys watched a video on him yesterday. Louis XIV, when he first became king at the age of 5, faced a revolution. Now this was brought up amongst the nobles as well as merchants and peasants. So this is kind of a general rebellion across the board. Eventually he gains the support of the merchants and nobles, and they crush the peasants, as tends to happen a lot. But he never does really trust anybody again after this. So he begins setting himself up as an absolute monarch. Let me check this real quick, make certain that the baby hasn't exploded or something. Oh, nope. The thing is that whenever your kid first starts sleeping the whole night, you feel like you like wake up in a panic because you're like, are they dead? Because you're so used to them waking you up, it's like, oh no, they're asleep. Okay, cool. That's the first thing you think, because it could be something normal, like they're just sleeping. You panic a lot when you're there. It's fine. It's part of it. So anyhow, dude, he takes the sign of the sun for his rule. Now, the video was talking about the sun god Apollo, and that is true, but he didn't think he was a god. He actually originally took the sun symbol because he was trying to say that his reign was going to be like the sun. It's predictable. It was going to last forever. Now, again, it didn't mean like he was going to live forever. He knew that. It was more like, my dynasty is going to last forever. And he was a firm believer in the divine right, which basically meant that God had a plan. And so, if he was king, it was because God wanted to be king, wanted him to be king. The reason he was born king was because he was supposed to be. It's sort of like mandate of heaven, basically. And he went about establishing absolute power. He did not share it. He did have intendants, which is this word right here. Which were basically guys who acted as bureaucrats, but they responded directly to the king. He had his hands in everything. He also knew how to have a good time. He threw parties basically on a daily basis. You guys read the 2 accounts from Versailles, and how some folks were very, very awed by it, and other folks like, okay, it's another party, But that's because he had it all the time. And he loved to spend money. Like, he was also a bit of a prankster. Like, there's a story I saw one time, I think it was in a movie, too, The Man in the Iron Mask, where he was at this party, and he brought out this beautiful diamond necklace. And he said, this is the treasure that the unicorn protects. Whoever catches the unicorn, they have the necklace. And he takes it, and there's this pig, a little piglet that's greased, with a little horn on its head. Behold our unicorn. And then he ties this necklace around it and says, right, to the chase. And off the pig goes. So you got these lords and ladies in these really elaborate costumes chasing a greased pig. And he's just laughing the entire time. He also had these seats established in the royal gardens that where you have picnics and folks would come sit down. He was sitting there and he was chatting, having a good old time. And underneath his chair, he had all these little like faucet type things. Because in each chair, other than his, was a little fountain, a little bit of water. And he would turn those on, it would wet down their bottom, so like a wet backside, but it was considered rude to like make a fuss or anything about it. You wanted to put your good foot forward, but also you couldn't stand up until the king stood up. So there's people who just turn that on, just kind of like, oh, are you uncomfortable? So, no, I'm totally fine. Are you sure? Things like that. He's totally trolling him the entire time and laughing. So this was Louis, but he was also very charming. He was the type of person who was really, really popular. I don't know if you guys got that part of the video, but he ends up going to war. And when he goes to war, he not only takes his wife with him, but he takes his mistress with him, who happen to be best friends. Which is like, what? Like sister-wives thing going on. But it's... The thing with queens is they weren't married to a man at that point. They were married to, like, a title, basically. And so, like, the whole idea of having, like, a loving relationship with their husband, the king, it happened, but was really infrequent. It was more like a partnership than anything. And you do see some women become intensely jealous of other women in court and begin this whole process. And sometimes it ends very badly, i.e. Anne Boleyn. Sometimes, though, they can kind of get away with it. It becomes sort of a game for hanging on to the king's affection. There's this whole political thing there as well. But not exactly the romantic fairy tale we tend to think about. But in the case of Louis, like, the queen was like, well, I get mad about it. It's just part of life. She's like, whatever. And so was the, her actual name was the lady, Madame de Pompadour, which was actually an episode of Doctor Who. That's not even know that. However, he had to spend a little too much money. And without Jean-Baptiste Colbert, his finance minister, money guy, he would have gone bankrupt a long time ago. He was a mercantilist who was a genius of moving money. He always made profits, at least as much as possible. Despite all of his efforts, though, the crown still went hugely into debt. Because Louis fought a lot of expensive wars that really didn't benefit the actual country of France. It was more about saving face. This is what Louis looked like.
Oh my God.
Yeah, everybody's always mentioning his legs. We got them heels. Actually, I think the funniest comment I ever heard someone say was like from the back row, it's like, man, he's got nicer legs than I do. Is that right?
There's no fun stars.
There's cellulite. Let's talk heels for a second. Why do we wear heels? Sure, all those things. What would you say if I told you that originally heels were for men?
I'll be curious.
The reason is for riding horses. Down the stirrup. That's why they were there. Two-stirrup row. So that's all bad. Do what? Honestly, I think if you see a guy in heels, that's kind of impressive, honestly. I'm very impressed by people wearing heels anyway. Like I see my wife, I'm just like the entire time I'm like, should I be worried? Like, you gonna fall down? It's like, oh, it's fine, But it's just, I don't know. Especially the ones that like stilts, you're basically like, I do think it's hilarious that, people spend so much money on shoes that they immediately take off when they get to dances and things like that because they're horribly uncomfortable. It's like, little flats or something. They're pretty. Anyways, let's talk about what he's wearing. So he's wearing stockings, as well as garters, which are worn by both sexes, by the way. He's also wearing 2 pairs of pants. Well, this is more for like elaborate, this ruffly lace, but this is for like embellishment. This is actually like the pantaloons versus the knee breeches. He also has 3 coats on, including the cape he's wearing. But it wasn't uncommon to wear a waistcoat, as well as an overcoat. In fact, he's also wearing this shirt that has to be buttoned at the top and held together with this looping cravat. And the thing is, the shirts of the period actually go down to the knee, basically, actually a little bit above, and it's about right about here, because they didn't wear underwear. And so to keep friction apart, they would tuck and get everything up, you know, that's what you did. So basically that meant that shirts were underwear. So you will never see anybody wearing just a shirt unless it is grievously inappropriate. Like just wearing a shirt out in public would have been like going around your underwear in public today. So, you know, we don't think about it, but like, it's like if you take your coat off and your shirt sleeves are showing, it's like you're scandalous. That was the period, you know? That was what they wore. In fact, it's funny, he's wearing so many clothes, he had to have help getting dressed. Now, women also had to help getting dressed, but from my experiences with dressing in clothes, from a little bit later era than this, it takes me longer to get dressed than my wife. My wife puts on her stuff and she's done. I feel like, for instance, my military coat has something like 50 buttons on it, something like that. I think the coat has 20, when I think about it. And I think the undercoat has another 10. The pants have something like 10. Like, I've got a friend who's got a coat that's got 100 buttons on it. These buttons were used for a military. Yeah.
So, like, where do they wear the clothes?
Yeah, basically.
Did they sleep together, like, in the same room, or was that just a rule?
Consider this for just a second. Most homes were one room.
You saw people when they woke up.
Yes. However, there's also many stories of, you know, kids, whenever they could, they'd get out of the house and sleep other places. For instance, if it was a smaller house, you know, and it was nice weather outside, they'd go sleep outside. Things like that. In really well-to-do houses, there was a part of the house above the kitchen. I can't remember the name of it, but basically that's where the boys were sent to all sleep. Like, you know, the families would live in their own room and things like that. But the kids were all sent to one place because they were little hellions and just let them run amok above the kitchen. What can they possibly do up there?
Did the kids sleep outside naked?
Yeah.
Oh.
No. Inside they did, though. And actually it makes a lot of sense because if you think about laundry and laundering and things like that, you wanted to keep your clothes from getting wrinkled as much as possible. Now that being said, there was such thing as nighttime dresses and things like that, but it was basically undies. And most folks would wear something like this on their head. Exactly. This was an adjustable nightcap. It's got the little top thing on it, just different sizes, things like that. A friend of mine made this for a Christmas present. Actually, it was a 12th night present. But anywho, I can tell you that if you're ever camping in cold weather, you want something on your head. It's going to keep you warm. The whole idea of losing most of your heat through your head is actually debunked. It's not true, but if you think about it, it's quite a lot of surface area of flesh, and you're losing heat with that area, so you want to cover as much of everything as possible. So we wear stuff like this. In some cases, chips, and in the case of guys, shirts, although generally speaking, that just makes wrinkled and not usable, so you hang it up and go ahead. Yeah?
We don't want to do this in this area.
No. No, because think about this, there's no air conditioning, there's no heat. Things get very cold. Basically imagine, like, if you had a place where trying to survive in the winter with no heat, it's unpleasant. And it's actually relatively temperate here. That's why everyone had fireplaces. Anyways, so Versailles became the power center that we watched yesterday, and he institutes what's called the levée system because he needs to control the nobles. Even though he takes away their armies, they're still competing with each other. It's human nature. So instead of having them fight, and another thing I understand is dueling was a problem. People died all the time in duels, and you can't have your nobles dying off like crazy. So what he did is he instituted the Louise system. Basically, it was all of the nobles acting as servants. Here's how it works. All the power comes from the king, yes? If you're friends with the king, you're getting all the best positions, you're getting good land and money, stuff like that. You want to be buddy-buddy with the king. So the king comes to you and says, hey, dude, I really need your help with something, okay? Can you meet me at my room tomorrow morning when I get up? Yeah! We're going to be in direct, I'm going to be with him in the morning? Hell yeah, I want to do that. And so you show up, and then there's every noble in court just hanging out in this guy's bedroom. He's asleep. And you're like, what are you guys doing here? You know, and like, especially if you have like an enemy as another noble, you're like sneering at him. So they're like Potter and Malfoy. It's like, I thought I'd hear of this. You know? So this whole thing is going on. And the king wakes up, he's like, oh, thank goodness can you come here for something? You're like, yeah. And you're like, show you, buddy. It's like, my majesty, what can I do for you? He's like, my slippers are like really far away. Can you like hand them to me? Oh, they're really far. Oh, yes, of course, Your Majesty. Oh, thank you, so great. He calls another noble. Can you like give me my wash face? I need to wash my face. And then he takes him through all these various stages. So proximity to the king's important. So the jobs where you like get to be close to him, like maybe you put on his coat, oh, you have to touch him. That becomes the thing you want to do. And so he switches jobs every day, so you don't know what job you're going to get. But you're hoping that you can get the good job and show everybody, see, I'm more important than you are. And this is the games they fought over. Who's got to like change his face water in the morning? That's the Louise system. It's brilliant. Because suddenly they're not fighting each other over land armies and people are dying. They're bickering over who gets to like comb his hair. You know? It totally works. There's also the golden age of arts for France. Ballet exists because of Louis. The academies of France are where everybody from other countries is sent who wants to be anybody in the artistic world. So the art of France becomes dominant throughout Europe. Basically, it becomes the thing everybody wants. So that's the front door of Versailles. You guys saw it yesterday. This is the Hall of Mirrors. And again, if you look at it, it's really, I'm kind of speeding up because I'm running out of time, but again, you can see all these various layers of wood, and it's beautiful. It's also incredibly expensive. This is the Queen's bedroom. And someone asked the question, can someone see? Here's the thing. When you were a king, or rather, when you were a queen, let me put it this way, king and queen didn't sleep in the same bedroom. Anyone who could afford to had different bedrooms. So it's generally tailored to be reminiscent of the person who lived in. So like, for instance, ladies' rooms tend to have a lot of like, you got this makeup station, you've got that nice fireplace and all this stuff, who reflected the woman who lived there. Same thing with guys' rooms. And if couples wanted to visit, the guy would come to the lady's room, or in some cases he could request her to come to his room. That was rude. Instead, you shouldn't put the lady out. You should, come to her and go ahead. The thing is that anytime the king and queen played Scrabble, yeah, there was the possibility of, let me put it this way, anytime the Burger King visited the Dairy Queen, there was a possible of a Whopper Jr. And this meant that every time that happened, somebody had to watch to make certain that it was recorded that it happened. Usually it was the mother-in-law. In fact, it was a court tradition that on the wedding night, when the couple went to bed, the entire court would be in the room, and they would...
Way to play Scrabble, bud.
Well done. Anywho, that's why that fence is there. TMI. Well, actually, going back for a second, you see how it's got the curtain around the bed? Yeah. It did provide some privacy, yeah. What? The thing is, it wasn't about privacy. It was about succession again. Because here's the thing: is they didn't have genetic testing or anything like that. If a child is born the queen, you can't just take her word that she hasn't been messing around. Because if she does, if she gets pregnant by somebody else, suddenly a bastard is on the throne.
Didn't they give them like a book to sign every time they did anything?
Oh, they did.
Well, then that's
There's a measure.
they don't gotta.
Oh, no. Someone else had to make certain that it wasn't doctored. Look, I'm not saying it wasn't awkward as all get out, but I can kind of see why they have to do that given the problems of the age. That being said, there's a reason that monarchies kind of went out of fashion years ago.
What about the normal people, just the civilians?
They no. No. That's again the thing is we often fantasize about the wealthy and powerful throughout history, but frequently it was the lesser people who had more rights and freedoms, at least in regards to certain things. I suppose it depends on what matters to you, but you know the thing you have to understand is if you were a princess or a queen, your privacy didn't matter. That's kind of how it was. Anyway, so Louis ruled for a total of 72 years, one of the longest reigns in history, in fact. But when he left, France was up a creek. Like, during his reign, golden age. After him, utter failure. It's going to start collapsing over the next 100 years, which I guess is a long time to collapse. The problem is he sets a trend of spending money that the country doesn't have, and his successors don't stop. Eventually, due to economic depression, it leads desperate and hungry people to one of the bloodiest revolutions in the history of the world. In addition, we have the War of Spanish Succession, which is going to cause all manner of other problems, and as well as the revoking of the Edict of Nantes. So anyhow, that's it. I'm going to take this thing off now because it's slowly sliding in my head. Yes, ma'am.
Now can the king and queen sleep together?
Yeah. No, I'm not
Watch
saying.
it.
No, not to my knowledge, in any case. But then again, it's a different. Like the king and queen nowadays have very little power. They're basically figureheads, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording because all you guys are doing is writing down this last part. So there's not like 15 minutes of silence. But anyways, that's it in terms of the material that we'll be quizzing over.